I was driving alone on the state highway after Thanksgiving, heading back home to Indiana, and it was already past 2 in the morning. I am 35 years old, and I had spent the holiday with family, but stayed too late talking, eating, and helping clean up. I thought I could handle driving in the early hours, like I had done other times. The road was long, straight in many stretches, surrounded by dark fields and almost no traffic at that hour. The radio was on low, just to keep me awake, and I was fighting that heavy fatigue that coffee alone doesn't fix. It was on a more isolated stretch of the highway that I saw the car for the first time. A black sedan parked on the shoulder, completely dark. No headlights, no hazard lights, nothing. It looked completely shut down, as if it had been abandoned there. That caught my attention immediately because it didn't make sense for someone to stop like that on a dark, cold road. I slowed down a bit, more out of instinct than conscious decision, trying to see if there was anyone inside or any sign of trouble. As I got closer, I felt that internal alert that shows up when something doesn't quite fit. When I passed alongside the sedan, I couldn't see anyone inside. The windows were too dark and the lack of any light made the car seem empty. As soon as I passed it, I looked in the rearview mirror out of habit. At that exact moment, the sedan's headlights suddenly turned on, along with the engine. The car pulled out from the shoulder far too fast for someone who had supposedly been stopped for a long time. In just a few seconds, it was already on the road behind me. At first, I tried not to think too much about it. I told myself it was just someone who had pulled over for a problem and then got going again. Even so, the way it entered the road stuck with me. I kept driving at the same pace, expecting the sedan to pass me or slow down. It didn't. It stayed exactly behind me, keeping the same distance, not too close, not far enough to disappear into the dark. Every time I adjusted my speed, it adjusted too. I tested slowing down a bit, it slowed down. I accelerated slightly, it followed. The road remained empty. No other cars, just the two of us on that long, dark stretch. The fatigue I'd felt before turned into something else, a tense alertness that forced me to stay awake. After a few minutes like that, I started to get genuinely nervous. It wasn't normal for someone to maintain that exact distance for so long on an empty highway. I checked the rearview mirror several times trying to see the driver, but all I could make out was the reflection of headlights that were too bright against the darkness. There was no turn signal, no attempt to pass. It was as if the car was there just to stay there. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but I could feel my shoulders rigid, my jaw clenched. I thought about calling someone, but the idea of taking my attention off the road felt wrong at that moment. I decided to speed up a little, going faster than I normally would on that highway. The sedan sped up as well without hesitation. That's when it changed position. Instead of staying behind me, it began to move up on my left side slowly, until it was parallel with me. I could see the dark outline of the car beside me, but I couldn't see anyone's face. The car came too close, encroaching slightly into my lane. Instinctively, I pulled the wheel to the right to avoid contact, and I felt his car move even closer, as if trying to push me off the road. My heart started racing in a way I had never felt while driving before. The edge of the road there didn't have a wide shoulder, just a strip of loose gravel before the dark brush. I knew that if I lost control at that speed, I wouldn't get a second chance. I tried to slow down a bit to see if he would pass, but the sedan slowed down too and stayed right next to me. There was no horn, no gesture. Just that presence beside me, steady, as if testing how long I would hold out. The sound of the tires on the asphalt grew louder, mixed with the wind noise coming through the cracks of the window. That's when I saw ahead a sign indicating a 24-hour gas station. It was small, one of those roadside stations, but it had lighting far too bright for all that darkness. Without thinking much, I signaled and cut sharply to the right, pulling almost all at once into the station's lot. The sedan followed me in for a second, but when I passed under the bright lights, it slammed on the brakes. In the rearview mirror, I saw the car make a tight turn and head back onto the highway, accelerating away without even slowing down. I sat there for a few minutes with the engine running, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, trying to understand what had just happened. I pulled into the station slowly and parked near the glass door. There was an attendant behind the counter looking at his phone, and the presence of another person made my body relax a little. even with my heart still pounding. I got out of the car and stood there for a few seconds, feeling the cold of the early morning and the strong smell of fuel. I looked toward the road, expecting to see the sedan come back or pass by slowly, but I saw nothing. The highway was empty again, as if nothing had happened there minutes before. I went to the counter and bought a bottle of water just to have an excuse to stay. My voice sounded strange when I spoke, and the attendant glanced at me briefly but didn't ask anything. I stayed inside the station for almost 15 minutes. I drank the water slowly, washed my face in the bathroom, and tried to get my breathing back to normal. When I returned to the car, I looked at the road again. Still nothing. I decided to wait a bit longer with the engine off, watching the light reflect on the asphalt. The silence returned to that typical late-night highway silence. No movement, no signs of life. Even so, I couldn't shake the feeling that the sedan had only left because there was too much light there. As if that alone had been enough to interrupt whatever was happening. When I got back on the road, I drove for a long time with my body still tense. I kept a steady speed, lower than before, and alternated my gaze between the road ahead and the rearview mirror. Any distant pair of headlights made my stomach tighten. I didn't turn on music, didn't touch my phone, I just wanted to get home. The road felt longer than ever, and every dark stretch reminded me of how that sedan had appeared out of nowhere, completely unlit, as if it had been waiting for someone to pass. I got home close to 4 in the morning. I parked, sat in the car for a few seconds before getting out, and looked down the empty street in both directions. Nothing out of the ordinary. I went inside, locked the door, and went straight to the bedroom without even taking off my coat. I didn't sleep well that night. In the days that followed, I tried to convince myself it had just been an aggressive driver, someone drunk or overly tired. But every time I pass a car parked on the shoulder at night, with everything turned off, I feel the same chill rise up. Because that early morning someone stayed in the dark waiting, and only gave up when there was enough light to be seen. A few weeks later, I even thought about calling the highway patrol to report what had happened, but I gave up. I didn't have a license plate, didn't have a description of the driver, didn't have anything concrete beyond my word. What bothered me most was exactly that, the feeling that everything had been calculated to leave no trace. A car dark enough not to be seen from afar, a pursuit precise enough not to be coincidence, an immediate retreat when a lit place appeared. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like it hadn't been an impulse, it felt practiced. Since then, I avoid driving alone late at night on empty highways. If I have no choice, I stop at gas stations whenever I can, even if I don't need to. I pay attention to cars stopped on the shoulder like never before. Not to help, not to get a better look, but to pass as quickly as possible. That night taught me that not all danger comes at high speed or with headlights on. Some of it stays in the dark, waiting for you to slow down, waiting for you to look. And when you realize it, you're no longer alone on the road. Story 2. I am 29 years old, and this happened when I was driving back alone from visiting relatives in rural Georgia. It was already late, close to midnight, and I had insisted that I could manage the drive home the same day. The road was rural and narrow with no lighting, passing through dense wooded areas and a few scattered farms. There was no cell service in several stretches, and hardly any cars passed by at that hour. I was already tired, but I wanted to get home. I kept my high beams on whenever I could and drove attentively, because anything on that road appeared at the last second. It was on one of those darker stretches that I heard someone shouting. At first I thought it was my imagination, some sound carried by the wind. But then I heard it again, clearer this time, a voice asking for help. At the same time, I saw a flashlight blinking in the woods a few meters ahead, on the right side of the road. The light wasn't steady. It blinked as if someone were trying to get attention without coming too close. My first instinct was to slow down. I thought of someone injured, a broken down car, a real emergency. Even so, I felt immediate discomfort because there was no vehicle stopped nearby. I slowed down a lot and stopped a few meters ahead, keeping the car in gear and my foot firmly on the brake. I didn't turn off the engine. I lowered the window just a little to hear better, trying to keep my distance. The voice asked for help again, coming from the woods. It sounded breathless, male. The flashlight blinked faster this time, as if the person had realized I had stopped. I asked out loud if everything was okay and if they needed me to call the police. I didn't get a direct answer, just another urgent request for me to come closer. That was when I felt something was too wrong to ignore. Before I could decide anything else, I saw movement in the rearview mirror. A silhouette appeared behind my car, emerging from the darkness of the road, walking far too fast for someone who was injured. My stomach dropped instantly. I didn't wait any longer. I released the brake and accelerated hard. In the rearview mirror, I clearly saw two people running toward the road, one coming out of the woods with the flashlight and the other from behind my car, as if the call for help had been a coordinated signal. I didn't look back again. The car responded quickly, but my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. The road was narrow with no shoulder, and I felt the car sway when I accelerated more than I should have. Through the rearview mirror, I still saw the two silhouettes reach the edge of the road, one of them raising an arm as if trying to reach me, but they quickly became too small in the darkness. I didn't hear any more shouting, nor did I see the flashlight again. There was only the sound of my own car and my short, shallow breathing inside the vehicle. I didn't slow down for several minutes, even when the road became straight again. I drove with my entire body tense, expecting at any moment to see headlights appear behind me. I checked the rearview mirror every few seconds, even knowing it didn't help. My mind tried to find a better explanation, something that didn't involve what seemed too obvious. Maybe someone really needed help. Maybe the second person was a coincidence, but nothing explained their appearance at the exact moment I stopped, right in the blind spot behind my car. That didn't feel improvised. After a few miles, I stopped in a more illuminated area, near a farm entrance with a reflective sign. I didn't turn off the car. I just needed a few seconds to take deep breaths and try to slow my heart down. My legs were shaking so much I could barely keep my foot steady on the pedal. I looked around, trying to understand whether I had done the right thing or if I was exaggerating everything out of fear. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that the situation hadn't been random. The flashlight, the shouting, the exact timing of the other person's appearance, none of it felt spontaneous. I got back on the road and kept driving until I found an open gas station, already close to 1 in the morning. I parked near the entrance and went straight to talk to the attendant, my voice still unsteady. I briefly explained that I had seen people on the side of the road asking for help and that something had felt wrong. He listened attentively and said it wasn't the first time someone had mentioned strange things happening on that stretch at night. He didn't give details, just recommended that I not stop there after dark anymore. That didn't reassure me. It only confirmed that I hadn't imagined everything on my own. I stayed at the station longer than necessary, just to feel that there were people around. I drank some water, washed my face, and stood looking through the glass window at the dark road, expecting to see a car pass by too slowly. Nothing happened. When I returned to my car, I hesitated for a few seconds before starting the engine, as if leaving that lit space meant returning to the same risk. I kept my high beams on and drove more attentively than ever, avoiding slowing down in any darker stretch. The feeling of vulnerability didn't fade quickly. I got home in the early morning hours, my body tired in a different way. I locked everything, left a few lights on, and sat on the bed without being able to sleep. I kept replaying the exact moment I stopped, the flashlight blinking in the woods, the silence behind the car before the silhouette appeared. What scared me most wasn't the idea of someone asking for help in the dark, but the coordination. It felt like someone was positioned exactly where I couldn't see, waiting for my reaction. That night changed the way I drive alone. Today, if I hear someone asking for help on the road, the first thing I do is drive to a lit place and call the police. Because on that road in Georgia, the call for help wasn't a request. It was a signal. In the days that followed, I told my sister and a close friend what had happened. Neither of them said I was exaggerating, but they didn't know what to say either. Their reaction was that uncomfortable silence that comes when something feels too plausible to ignore. One of them mentioned that in rural areas, she had heard stories of people using calls for help to make drivers stop. She didn't go into details, and I didn't ask. I already had too many images in my head. I started to notice how my body reacted just remembering the blinking flashlight in the dark. A few weeks later, I had to pass through that same stretch of road again, this time during the day. There was nothing there. No sign of a trail, no object tossed into the woods, no obvious place where someone could hide. That almost made me more nervous than finding something. The road looked too ordinary, too harmless. But I knew that at night, darkness changes everything. Since then, I avoid driving alone on rural roads after dark. Because that night, someone counted on my empathy to make me stop, and it almost worked. Sometime later, I realized that what stayed with me most wasn't the immediate fear, but the quiet change in how I react to certain situations. Before, I would have stopped without thinking twice to help someone on the side of the road. Today, my first impulse is to look for light, movement, people. Not because I've lost the desire to help, but because I learned that not every request comes from a safe place. That night taught me that darkness can hide more than one intention at the same time, and that the one who is shouting isn't always the one you need to fear most. To this day, when I drive alone at night and see any light blinking out of place, I feel the same knot in my stomach. I remember the rear view mirror, the two silhouettes appearing almost in sync, as if rehearsed. I'll never know what would have happened if I had gotten out of the car or waited a few more seconds. And maybe that's for the best. I only know that on that road in Georgia, I got away because I trusted that initial discomfort. Because sometimes instinct recognizes danger before the mind can find words to explain it. Story 3. I am 21 years old, and this happened when I was driving back to college alone along US 50 late at night. I had spent the weekend at home and always underestimated how tiring those return trips could be. The road was long and dark, cutting through practically empty areas with few gas stations and many stretches without lighting. It was one of those nights when the radio no longer helps keep you awake, and you drive more out of habit than real attention. I just wanted to get to campus and sleep. At a certain point, I realized I had missed the correct exit. I couldn't simply keep going forward, so I continued until the next authorized turnaround. I slowed down, made the wide curve, and headed back in the opposite direction of the highway. It was at that moment that I noticed a pickup truck parked on the shoulder, just a few meters past the turnaround. It was dark, probably black or navy blue, with no headlights on and no hazard lights. I thought it was strange, but I didn't stop to think too much about it. Empty roads have things like that. I just slowed a bit and passed by. When I looked in the rearview mirror a few seconds later, I saw the pickup's lights turn on. Not only did the lights turn on, but the pickup pulled onto the road almost immediately. At first, I tried not to jump to conclusions. I thought it might just be someone who had also stopped there for some reason, and decided to keep driving. Even so, the way it pulled in behind me put me on alert. It didn't accelerate to pass, and it didn't keep a comfortable distance. It stayed there, steady, as if it had been waiting for exactly that moment. The road continued practically empty, and the feeling of being followed became heavy far too quickly. I kept driving at the speed limit, trying to keep things normal. I looked at the rearview mirror a few times, but all I could see were headlights that were too bright, reflecting off the glass. After a few minutes, I decided to test it. I sped up a little. The pickup sped up too. I took my foot off the accelerator. It slowed down as well. It wasn't a coincidence. My stomach tightened, and I felt that dry chill that comes when you realize you're no longer in control of the situation. The memory of seeing that vehicle parked completely dark, right after the turnaround, suddenly made much more sense than I wanted it to. After a few miles like that, the pickup changed position. It drifted slightly to the left as if it were going to pass, but it never completed the maneuver. It stayed there, in my blind spot, forcing my attention to split between the road and that heavy shape beside me. I could see the height of the vehicle and the faint reflection of its body under the light of my headlights. I couldn't see the driver. That made me even more tense because it felt far too intentional. There was no hurry, no mistake, just following. I thought about calling someone, but the signal was weak and I didn't want to take my eyes off the road. I started mentally searching for any open place along that route. I remembered that a few miles ahead there was a truck stop lot, used by semis for overnight rest. It wasn't exactly a gas station, but it usually had activity even late at night. I kept my speed and headed in that direction, trying not to make any sudden changes. The pickup stayed right there as if it knew exactly where I was going. When I spotted the entrance to the truck lot, I felt a wave of relief that came too fast to feel real. It was a large, open space, brightly lit by tall floodlights, with several trucks parked and a few people walking between them. I signaled early and slowed down to turn in. The pickup slowed down too. I turned into the lot and drove toward a more central area, close to where two truck drivers were talking outside one of the trucks. Only then did I stop the car. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. In the rearview mirror, I saw the pickup stop outside the lot, still on the highway. It didn't come in. It stayed there, engine running, headlights on, pointed directly at the entrance. It didn't honk, didn't move forward, didn't leave. It just stayed there as if watching. I stayed inside the car, doors locked, trying to look normal while pretending to check my phone. The minutes passed far too slowly. I glanced over occasionally, and the pickup was still in the same place, motionless. After a while, that felt much longer than it really was. The pickup finally moved. It didn't speed off. It didn't peel out. It simply turned on its signal slowly and went back onto the road, heading in the opposite direction from where I needed to go. Even then, I didn't get out of the car right away. I watched until the lights completely disappeared around the curve in the highway. Only then did I unlock the door and take a deep breath, my legs feeling weak. One of the truck drivers looked at me from a distance, maybe noticing that I was sitting there without an obvious reason. But he didn't ask anything. I didn't explain either. I waited a few more minutes before leaving the lot. When I got back on the road, I drove with much more attention than before, checking the rearview mirror constantly. The rest of the drive to campus was silent and tense, even with no car behind me. I parked on campus in the early morning hours and sat in the car for a few seconds before getting out, trying to understand what had just happened. To this day, when I miss an exit at night and need to make a turnaround, I remember that pickup truck parked in the dark, as if it were waiting for someone to make a mistake. In the days that followed, I tried to treat it as an isolated scare, something caused by exhaustion and an empty road. Even so, the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. The pickup wasn't just parked. It was positioned right after the turnaround with its lights off at the exact spot where someone would know another driver would have to slow down. And it pulled onto the road the second I passed, as if it had been waiting for that specific moment. That didn't match coincidence. It matched waiting. I told the story to a friend from college a few days later, in a somewhat vague way. He listened in silence and said that US 50 had stretches known for being too deserted at night. He didn't say it to scare me, but he also didn't try to downplay it. That conversation stayed with me because it was the first time someone didn't try to turn what happened into an exaggeration on my part. There was no explanation, just the acceptance that certain roads change completely when they're empty. To this day, whenever I drive late at night and miss an exit, I feel my body tense up before I even think. I look at the shoulder, watch for dark vehicles, and slow down only as much as necessary. That night taught me that not every danger comes chasing you right away. Some stay still in the dark, waiting for you to come back. After that, I never passed that stretch of US 50 the same way again. Even during the day, I recognized the turnaround point and felt an automatic tightness in my chest. At night, I don't think twice. If I miss an exit, I keep going until I find a well-lit place with movement before trying to turn back. That experience made it clear to me how a simple routing mistake can put you in a completely different situation. Without warning, there was no direct threat, no words, but there was enough intention not to be ignored. What stuck with me the most was the pickup's final behavior. It didn't flee when I entered the lot. It didn't panic. It just stayed there, stopped watching, as if evaluating, waiting for me to come back out. Those minutes were worse than the pursuit itself, because there it became clear that it wasn't urgency or anger or chance. It was patience. To this day, when I see a vehicle stopped in the dark just past a turnaround, I think of that night, and I keep going without looking back twice. Story 4. My girlfriend and I were traveling along Route 66, heading back from a visit to her family when we decided to stop to sleep. It was already past midnight. We were far too tired to keep driving, and we didn't have a reservation anywhere. The town was small, the kind that practically disappears after the sun goes down. The motel sat right off the highway, an old U-shaped building with only a few lights on and a worn-out sign flickering with half its letters out. It wasn't our first choice, but it was the only place open at that hour. The receptionist looked just as tired as we were. An older man, speaking softly, not very interested in conversation. While he was checking us in, He casually mentioned that the motel was practically empty. He said there was only one other room occupied besides ours. That caught my attention, but it didn't seem important at the time. We took the key, parked in front of the room, and went inside. The room was simple, with a strong smell of cleaning products, worn carpet, and that typical silence of a place where almost no one is staying. We locked the door, dropped our bags, and turned off the light almost immediately. I woke up in the middle of the night to a sound too faint to identify right away. I lay still for a few seconds, trying to figure out whether it was noise coming from the road or from the room next door. Then I heard footsteps in the exterior corridor very close, moving slowly across the worn carpet. It wasn't someone just passing by. The sound would stop for a few seconds, then continue. My girlfriend shifted beside me and whispered, asking if I had heard that too. Before I could answer, we heard a soft click at our door, like someone carefully testing the handle without pulling hard. My entire body tensed instantly. The footsteps moved on to the next room and the same sound repeated. A quick test, almost polite, and then silence for a few seconds. I lay there holding my breath, trying to hear anything else that might explain it. There were no voices, no laughter, no sound of conversation. Just spaced out footsteps and the light metal sound of a doorknob being touched. I thought about calling the front desk, but the idea of making noise at that moment felt wrong. I locked the door again, even though I knew it was already locked, and stared into the darkness of the room, waiting to hear the sound return to our door. The footsteps continued down the corridor for several more minutes, going door to door, always at the same slow pace. At no point did anyone try to force their way in. It was as if the person was simply checking, confirming something, and moving on. Eventually, the footsteps faded toward the far end of the motel and disappeared. The silence afterward was worse than the noise. My girlfriend was awake, breathing shallowly, and I could tell we were both trying to decide whether that had really happened or if exhaustion was playing tricks on us. We didn't sleep again that night. When it started to get light out, I got up and went to the door carefully. Before even unlocking it, I noticed something strange about the lock. There were fresh marks on the metal, small scratches around the keyhole, as if someone had used a thin tool and then given up halfway. I ran my finger over them and could tell it wasn't old wear. That hadn't been there when we arrived. I called my girlfriend over to look, and her expression changed immediately. We packed our things far too quickly for people who had just woken up and went straight to the front desk. At reception, the same man was behind the counter, drinking coffee as if the night had been completely normal. I told him what we had heard, trying not to sound accusatory, just explaining that someone had walked down the corridor and tested the doors. I showed him the marks on the lock. He frowned and calmly said that it didn't make sense. He repeated that there was only one other occupied room and that guest had arrived early and hadn't gone out at any point during the night. He also said that after 11, no staff members walked the corridors. The calm way he spoke made me more uncomfortable than any defensive response would have. I asked if there were cameras in the corridor. He said no, only an old one pointed at the parking lot, and that nothing unusual had been recorded. He insisted that no one should have passed through there at night and suggested that maybe we had heard the guest from the occupied room going to their car. That didn't match what we heard. It didn't explain the pauses at each door or the marks on the lock. He limited himself to apologizing and said he had never had problems like that before. We took the receipt and left without arguing. As we got into the car, I looked down the corridor one last time. It was empty, far too silent, as if nothing had happened there hours earlier. We got back on the road early, with the sun just starting to rise, and tried to talk about anything else. Even so, the subject always drifted back to the night. I kept thinking about the most specific detail of all: the care. Whoever had walked through there wasn't drunk, wasn't lost, and wasn't in a hurry. They walked slowly, tested the doors carefully, and stopped when they met resistance. That didn't seem like someone looking for their own room. It seemed like someone checking which doors would give without drawing attention. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that if we had forgotten to lock the door, the story might have been very different. A few miles later, my girlfriend commented that the receptionist didn't seem genuinely surprised. Not defensive, not scared, just too calm. That stayed with me. I'm not saying he knew something, but the way he dismissed everything so quickly didn't match someone hearing that kind of story for the first time. We never stopped at that motel again. or at any similar one without first checking reviews and how busy it was. To this day, when I stay in places that are too empty at night, I pay attention to footsteps in the corridor and always check the lock before lying down. Because at that stop on Route 66, someone walked through the motel while everyone was sleeping, and only left because they found locked doors. After that night, I realized how the feeling of vulnerability changes when you're far from home, exhausted, and in a place that clearly isn't meant to have much activity in the middle of the night. It wasn't just fear that someone had tried to get into the room. It was the certainty that someone had enough time, silence, and opportunity to test door after door without being interrupted. That stayed in my head for the rest of the trip. Every old motel we passed afterward seemed to carry the same hidden risk behind dim lights and corridors that were too long. To this day, when I stop at a place that's too empty during the night, I remember that silent corridor and the soft sound of a doorknob being tested. I remember especially the marks on the lock, small enough to go unnoticed, but clear enough to prove it wasn't imagination. I don't know who walked through that motel in the early hours of the morning or why. I only know that someone was moving around there when no one should have been awake, and that for some reason they gave up. Sometimes knowing that someone tried and failed is more disturbing than never knowing who it was at all. Story 5. I am 34 years old, and this happened very early one morning while I was driving alone on a secondary road in rural Missouri. I had left before dawn to avoid traffic and arrive early at work in a neighboring town. The road was narrow, unlit, passing through fields and low woodland. It was still dark, but the sky was just beginning to lighten slightly, that grayish-blue color that tricks your sense of fatigue. I was driving attentively because at that hour animals often appear on the road. The radio was off and my car was the only thing making noise on that stretch. It was on a gentle curve that I saw something move ahead. It didn't drop out of nowhere. It looked like it was being slowly dragged into the middle of the road from the shoulder. I slammed on the brakes immediately, feeling the car pull and the tires complain against the cold asphalt. It was something large and heavy, hard to identify in the dark, but it took up a good portion of the lane. It didn't look like an animal. It wasn't moving on its own. It looked like an object being pulled by someone outside my field of vision. My heart started racing before I even came to a complete stop. When the car stopped, I saw movement on both sides of the road almost at the same time. Two people emerged from the sides, one on the left and one on the right, stepping out from the shadows of the brush. They didn't run. They walked a few steps forward, far too slowly for someone who was startled. I couldn't see their faces, only dark outlines against the sky that was beginning to brighten. Neither of them said anything. The object remained stopped in the middle of the road, exactly where I would have driven through if I hadn't braked. The immediate feeling was that of a trap, simple and far too direct to be a coincidence. Without thinking much, I put the car in reverse and accelerated. The car jolted backward, and I turned the steering wheel to line up better with the road as I reversed. In the rearview mirror, I saw one of the people take a few quick steps forward, as if trying to get closer to the car. The other stayed farther back, near the shoulder. I didn't wait to see anything else. As soon as I had enough space, I turned sharply and headed in the opposite direction, accelerating as much as I could. I didn't hear any shouting, didn't see anyone running after me. I just got out of there as fast as possible. I drove for several minutes without slowing down, even when the road straightened out. My entire body was rigid, and I felt that strange tingling in my hands that comes after a serious scare. I kept looking at the rearview mirror, expecting to see headlights appear behind me, but the road went back to being empty. I only stopped when I reached a more open stretch near an intersection with a larger road. I pulled over, took a deep breath, and tried to organize what had just happened. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that it hadn't been an accident or an object forgotten on the road. Someone had put that thing there, at the exact moment I was approaching. I stayed there for a few minutes, trying to decide what to do. Going back alone didn't seem like an option, but I also couldn't just continue as if nothing had happened. I called the local police and explained the situation as directly as possible. An object blocking the road, people appearing from the sides, immediate escape. The dispatcher asked a few questions and said a patrol car could meet me if I went back to a designated point. I waited right there until I saw the blue lights approaching. When the officer arrived, I explained everything again, my voice still a bit unsteady. He suggested that we go back together to the location to check it out. We returned along the same road a few minutes later, now with the patrol car in front. The sky was already lighter, that early morning light that makes everything look far too normal. When we reached the exact spot where I had stopped before, there was absolutely nothing on the road. No object, no large branch, no rock. The asphalt was clean. The officer got out of the car and calmly looked around, walking a few meters to each side. I got out too, pointing to where the object had been and where the people had appeared from. The more I explained, the stranger it felt to see the place so empty. It was the officer himself who noticed the shoulder first. The ground was disturbed with recent marks as if something heavy had been dragged away in a hurry. They weren't old tire marks or clear footprints, but the grass was flattened irregularly, forming a short trail leading into the brush. There was no sign of a struggle, no trash, nothing that explained why anyone would be there at that hour. The officer was silent for a few seconds, observing, and then said it didn't look like something an animal had done. That sent an immediate chill through me. The officer took a few photos of the shoulder with his phone and said he would include it in the report, but he also made it clear that without the object and without finding anyone nearby, there wasn't much more that could be done at that moment. He asked if I had seen any car stopped, any other detail. I said no, that I had only seen the two people appear from the sides and nothing else. The way he nodded, without dismissing my account but without being able to confirm anything, left me with a strange sense of emptiness. It wasn't relief. It was the feeling that something had happened and had simply been erased too quickly. After the officer left, I stood there for a few seconds on that stretch of road, now completely ordinary in the morning light. A few cars passed in the distance, and everything looked far too normal to match what had happened there shortly before. I got back in the car and continued on my way, but the rest of the drive was done in absolute silence. In the days that followed, I tried to convince myself that I had escaped something serious. To this day, when I drive too early on secondary roads and see anything out of place on the shoulder, I slow down as little as possible and keep going. Because that morning in Missouri, someone dragged something heavy into the road and only failed to get what they wanted because I stopped in time to reverse. Story 6. I am 31 years old, and this happened when I was traveling alone through Kentucky, heading back home after a long weekend. It was already past 2 in the morning, and I was too tired to keep driving attentively. The road was a state highway, with very little traffic at that hour, surrounded by wooded areas and stretches of farmland. I had been fighting sleep for several miles, opening the window, turning off the radio, trying to stay alert. When I saw a small sign indicating a rest area just ahead, I felt immediate relief. I didn't remember seeing that rest area before, but at that moment I just wanted to stop for a bit. I took the exit expecting something simple, a few parking spaces, maybe a portable toilet. The place looked larger than I expected. There was a paved parking lot, concrete restrooms in the back, and a few picnic tables. What was strange was the silence and the lack of lighting. No light poles were on. The only light came from my car's headlights and a weak moon partially covered by clouds. Even so, there were clear tire marks on the ground and recent trash in the bins, as if people passed through there frequently. I parked slowly with that feeling that something didn't quite fit, but too tired to leave immediately. I stayed in the car for a few seconds before turning off the engine, looking around. There were other vehicles parked, scattered around the lot, but none of them seemed occupied. I didn't see any interior lights on, didn't hear doors closing, nothing that indicated people awake. Still, I had the strange impression that the place wasn't truly empty. When I turned off the engine, the silence became heavier, as if the sound of the car had been the only thing keeping the space normal. I got out of the vehicle to stretch my legs and felt the cold, damp, early morning air, with the smell of grass and earth. That was when I noticed movement. Something shifted between two cars farther away, too fast to be a cloud's shadow. It looked like a silhouette moving from one vehicle to another. I stood still, trying not to react, telling myself it was just my exhaustion playing tricks on my vision. But then I saw it again, closer to the restrooms. Two shadows now, moving low, like people walking without wanting to draw attention. No voices, no audible footsteps, just movement. I slowly backed toward the car, trying not to make noise with the clear feeling that I had been noticed the moment I arrived. I got into the car without slamming the door shut, just easing it closed, watching through the windshield. The shadows kept moving, never in a straight line, always circling cars, disappearing behind columns or low trees. They didn't seem random. It was as if they were repositioning themselves. I started the engine carefully, the sound far too loud in that silence, and I saw one of the shadows stop immediately. Another kept moving, more slowly. I didn't wait any longer. I put the car in gear and began to leave, trying to stay calm so I wouldn't make a wrong turn. That was when I noticed something wrong at the exit. A large vehicle, a van or a dark SUV, was parked partially across the exit lane, as if it had been left there carelessly. It wasn't completely off. I could see a faint glow on the dashboard, but there was no one visible inside. I instinctively slowed down, trying to see if I could get past, and at that moment I saw movement near the parked vehicle. A shadow moved from its side to behind a tree. My stomach dropped. That didn't look like a parking mistake. It looked placed there. I didn't stop to think much. I turned the wheel to the left and drove off the asphalt, cutting across the damp grass that surrounded the rest area. The car bounced hard, and for a second I thought it might get stuck, but I kept accelerating. In the rearview mirror, I saw more movement among the cars. I couldn't count how many people there were, only that the shadows had changed position far too quickly. No one ran after the car. No one shouted. What scared me was exactly that. It felt like there was no rush, as if I had left before the next part was supposed to happen. As soon as I got back onto the highway, I accelerated without looking back. I drove for several minutes with my heart racing, expecting to see headlights appear behind me. Nothing happened. I only stopped when I reached a brightly lit gas station a few miles later. I stayed there for a long time, sitting in the car, trying to understand exactly where I had stopped before. I took out my phone and opened the map to check that rest area. Nothing showed up, no icon, no marker, no name. The next day, already home, I searched again on official state maps. There was no record of that place, no rest area on that stretch. The following day, I called the State Department of Transportation just to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. I asked about rest areas on that specific stretch of highway, roughly describing the mile marker where I had exited. The woman on the other end of the line paused longer than expected before answering. She said there was no official rest area there, neither active nor decommissioned. I asked if any had been closed recently. She replied no, that stretch had never had one. The conversation ended politely, but I stared at the phone as if it could explain the rest. I went back to the map calmly, comparing routes, measuring distances, trying to understand where I had stopped. Everything pointed to a place that simply should not exist. It wasn't a small signage error. It was a full parking area with restrooms, spaces, trash bins, paved access. Something that would require at least minimal maintenance, records, some trace. But there was nothing. No mention, no photos, no online comments. It was as if that place had only been there that night, waiting for someone tired enough to pull in without questioning it. After that, I spent days trying to rationalize what I had seen. I thought about private property, an old abandoned lot, any explanation that didn't involve what my body had felt that night. But nothing explained the shadows moving between the cars or the vehicle positioned exactly to make leaving difficult. Even if the place wasn't official, someone was using it, and they used it at night in the dark, counting on the fact that anyone who stopped there would be too tired to question much. What bothered me most was the absence of urgency. The shadows didn't run when I started the car. The vehicle blocking the exit didn't move. There was no clear attempt to stop me by force. Everything seemed calculated to work only if I turned off the engine, only if I got out, only if I accepted that space as safe for long enough. The more I thought about it, the more I understood that I had left before the point where it wouldn't have been so easy to go. A few weeks later, I had to pass through Kentucky again during the day. I made a point of driving along the same stretch, watching carefully for any sign that resembled the entrance to that rest area. There was nothing. No sign, no strange exit, no widening of the shoulder. Just highway, brush, and fence. If I hadn't pulled in there that night, I would never have imagined something could exist at that spot. That gave me a strange sense of isolation, as if that experience couldn't truly be shared with anyone. To this day, when I travel at night and see a poorly marked exit, I think twice before entering. Rest areas are supposed to be predictable, visible, safe. That place was none of those things. I don't know who the people moving between the cars were, or what would have happened if I had turned off the engine and walked toward the restrooms. I only know that night in Kentucky, I stopped at a place that didn't appear on the map, and I left before someone decided that I shouldn't. Story 7. I was 19 years old when this happened, newly licensed, and I was driving alone through rural Texas in the middle of the night. I lived in a small town and had gone to visit a friend a few hours earlier, but I ended up staying longer than I had planned. I decided to drive back home at night anyway, thinking it would be fine. The road was long and straight, with few access points and practically no traffic at that hour. There was no public lighting, just my headlights cutting through the darkness and the constant sound of the engine. I was tense but trying to seem confident to myself, repeating that I had driven there other times during the day. After about 40 minutes of driving without seeing another car at all, I noticed strong lights appearing in my rearview mirror. It was a large truck, one of those heavy cargo trucks, approaching far too fast for such an empty road. It pulled in behind me and started flashing its headlights insistently. At first I thought it wanted to pass, so I maintained my speed and stayed well to the right of the lane. But it didn't pass. It kept flashing and then turned on its right turn signal several times, clearly signaling for me to pull over onto the shoulder. My stomach tightened immediately because that made no sense at all. There was no sign of an emergency and it didn't seem urgent. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that maybe he was warning me about some problem with my car. I quickly checked the dashboard and the mirrors. Nothing seemed wrong. Even so, I didn't pull over. The shoulder was far too narrow and surrounded by dark brush. That was when the truck pulled even closer and drove alongside me for a few seconds. The cab was high and I couldn't see the driver's face, only the shadow of his body inside. He began to deliberately slow down, forcing my car to slow down as well. That made it clear it wasn't a quick warning. It was insistence. My hands were sweaty on the steering wheel and I could feel my heart pounding in my neck. I started to accelerate slowly, going a bit over the speed limit just to create some distance. The truck accelerated with me. Then it slowed down again, as if it were testing how far I would go. The road remained empty, with no intersections, no houses, nothing. The sound of the truck's engine was too loud, constantly behind me, and that only made me more nervous. I thought about calling someone, but my phone signal was weak and I didn't want to take my attention off the road. The only thing on my mind was finding a lit place as quickly as possible. After a few minutes that felt much longer than they were, I saw in the distance the glow of an open gas station, one of those 24-hour ones, with strong white light that you can see from far away in the dark. As soon as I noticed it, I kept my speed and signaled to turn in. The truck still tried to stay beside me for a few seconds, slowing down again, as if it wanted me to stop before reaching the station. I completely ignored it. I turned right and drove straight into the lit area, passing quickly by the pumps. I parked near the store with the engine still running, feeling my legs shake. In the rearview mirror, I saw the truck continue straight down the road without slowing, without signaling, without even looking toward the station. It simply passed by and disappeared into the darkness, as if it had never needed me to pull over. I stayed parked for a few minutes trying to understand what had just happened. If there had been a real problem with my car, he would have stopped too. If it had been help, he would have explained. None of it made sense. I went into the station just to breathe near other people, and only went back to the road when I saw other cars passing. That night was the last time I trusted road signals in the dark. I stayed inside the station longer than I needed to, walking through the aisles without really buying anything. The air conditioning was too cold, and my hands were still shaking when I grabbed a bottle of water. I looked out the window several times, expecting to see the truck come back, pull into the lot, or at least slow down. Nothing. The road went on normally, cars passing occasionally, as if that stretch had never been empty minutes earlier. Little by little, my body started to come out of alert mode, but my mind didn't follow. I kept replaying the scene, trying to find a logical reason for someone to force another driver to pull over like that. When I returned to the car, I sat there for a few seconds before starting the engine. I took a deep breath and decided to continue, but I kept a lower speed and stayed alert for any lights in the rearview mirror. Every truck that appeared in the distance made me grip the steering wheel without realizing it. The rest of the drive was silent. No radio, no phone. I arrived home close to dawn, parked, and stayed sitting there with the engine off, listening to the car ticking as it cooled. I still wasn't sure what that truck wanted, but I was sure of one thing. If I had pulled over on that dark road alone and inexperienced, I don't think it would have been to receive help. After I got home, I couldn't sleep right away. I lay there, still dressed, listening to the normal sounds of the early morning coming through the open window. Every distant engine noise made me think of the truck again, of the way it pulled alongside me and reduced my speed without any rush. I tried to rationalize it, to think that maybe it was some kind of warning I had misinterpreted, but nothing explained why it went away as soon as I entered a lit place. If it had been a real problem, it would have insisted there, where there were people. Instead, it simply continued on its way, as if the objective had ended the moment I was no longer alone. What bothered me most was realizing how calculated it had been. There was no horn, no exaggerated gesture, no urgency. Just enough signals to make me consider pulling over on an empty stretch in the middle of the night. I stayed awake for hours, replaying the road in my head, imagining what would have happened if I had obeyed. To this day, when I drive at night and see a truck flashing its headlights behind me, my reaction is automatic. I look for light, I look for movement, I look for an exit. Because on that Texas road, someone tried to make me stop and gave up the second I was no longer vulnerable. A few days later, I told what had happened to an older friend who had been driving for years. I didn't dramatize it, I just reported the facts. He stayed silent for a moment and then said he had heard similar stories, especially on long, lightly traveled roads. He told me never to pull over if someone insisted like that in the middle of nowhere, and that real truck drivers usually warn quickly about a problem and keep going. That conversation didn't reassure me, but it confirmed that my instinct that night hadn't been an exaggeration. I drove that same road again other times, but never again in the middle of the night. Even during the day, I recognized the stretches where everything had happened and felt an automatic tightness in my stomach. It wasn't constant fear, it was heightened awareness. I started noticing details I used to ignore, like the width of the shoulder, the distance between gas stations, and how quickly certain areas became isolated. That night made me understand that an empty road completely changes the rules of what is safe or not. The following week, I realized I was driving differently without even thinking about it. I kept more distance, avoided being alone on long stretches, and paid exaggerated attention to rearview mirrors. Before, driving had been automatic for me. After that night, it became a sequence of conscious decisions. The strangest part was that nothing had actually happened in an explicit way. No one spoke to me. No one got out of the truck. No one threatened me. Even so, the sense of risk was far too clear to ignore. It felt like I had come very close to something and backed away in time. What stayed with me was the final detail. The truck didn't slow down at the station, didn't pull in, didn't try to talk to me where there was light and people. It simply went straight on. That made it clear it wasn't about help or safety. It was about the place, the time, and the fact that I was alone. Even today, when I think about that early morning, I don't imagine what the driver would have done. I imagine the silence of the road if I had pulled over, turned off the car, and gotten out thinking someone just wanted to warn me about something. And that's enough to make me never stop in the dark just because someone tells me to. After all of this, I realized that what marked me most wasn't the immediate fear, but the feeling of having been evaluated. The truck didn't appear out of nowhere on just any stretch. It showed up when the road was already empty, when I was tired, driving alone with no support points nearby. The driver had time to observe my reaction, to test whether I would obey the signals, whether I would pull over without questioning. When that didn't happen and I chose a lit place, the situation simply lost its purpose for him. That was very clear in the way he continued on without looking back. Today, when I remember that night, I think about how much the road changes when there are no witnesses. It wasn't an open chase, nor something that could be easily explained to the police. It was subtle, made to seem normal enough to create doubt, and maybe that's the most frightening part. Because if I had pulled over, maybe I would have been the one later trying to explain that it didn't seem like anything serious. That night taught me that on the road, blindly trusting signals coming from the dark can be a serious mistake. Sometimes the best decision is simply not to stop, even when someone insists.
I'm really grateful for staying until the last minute. It's always good to know that you're here, listening to every detail. If you liked it, comment which part was the scariest for you. And of course, sign up to keep listening to stories as dark as this one. See you in the next video.